The narrative of urban air pollution, it so often feels like this just impossible problem, a slow, inescapable tragedy affecting millions of people.
Right.
But what happens when a global metropolis actually manages to win that war?
Game changer.
Today, we're going to contrast two titans of Asian urbanization. On one hand, you have Beijing, which, less than a decade ago was the poster child for toxic smog.
Oh, definitely.
And then you have Delhi, which has tragically taken on that mantle. You probably remember the headlines from 2013, right? When public outrage in Beijing just peaked after this 2-week-long smog blackout. The AQI was horrifying.
Unbelievable numbers.
Now, fast forward to just last year, and Delhi has seen monitors peak at 1,500 on the AQI.
1,500.
Yeah. And to put that in perspective for you, that's 15 times higher than the level the World Health Organization even deems satisfactory for breathing.
And that dramatic contrast is exactly our mission for this deep dive. The difference between these cities. It's not just in the numbers, it's in the political commitment and, I think, the resulting biological costs that residents are paying.
Right.
We really need to unpack how Beijing pulled off its systemic change, the detailed, very expensive blueprint they followed. And then we have to confront the hidden, measurable health consequences in cities like Delhi. We're moving beyond just the air quality number to look at the epidemiological data, exploring the specific biological harm. We're talking DNA damage, lung injury, cardiovascular, and even neurological strain.
We've got some powerful sources today. There are these comprehensive policy reports from ICLEI and EPIC, stark international contrasts highlighted by India Today, and then these incredibly detailed epidemiological studies.
Yeah, from India's Central Pollution Control Board and the huge global burden of disease 2019 dataset.
Okay, let's unpack this blueprint for cleaner skies and the devastating biological cost of standing still.
So, the change in Beijing, it wasn't a small cleanup effort. This was a fundamental systemic overhaul.
Okay.
And it all started with that intense public outrage in 2013, which translated into Premier Li Keqiang declaring a formal war against pollution in 2014.
And this wasn't just talk.
Not at all. This wasn't cheap or symbolic. China committed an initial $100 billion for this multi-year mission.
$100 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just an astronomical figure for an environmental cleanup. That kind of political will and that kind of financial backing, it's a true game changer.
So what were the specific policy levers they pulled first?
Well, one of the most effective early moves was radically improving their monitoring capability.
Because you can't fix what you can't measure.
Precisely. Starting around 2016, they created this cutting-edge integrated air quality network. We're talking about using high-resolution satellite remote sensing paired with over 1,000 dense PM2.5 sensors.
1,000 sensors, all spread across the city. This gave them a level of granular minute-by-minute data that allowed officials to precisely identify high-emission hotspots. Whether it was a factory operating illegally or a sudden spike from traffic, and then react immediately.
With really targeted interventions.
Exactly.
So that granular monitoring would have fed directly into attacking the sources. But I have to imagine shutting down industrial centers in a huge city like that would have faced, significant economic pushback.
It did, but the commitment was absolute. They shut down 100 major industrial factories and significantly upgraded hundreds of others to meet these new, really stringent emission standards.
That's just industry.
That's just industry. But the true systemic change came from their energy policy. They undertook this massive energy shift, transitioning 6 million households in the region from burning highly polluting coal to using cleaner natural gas.
6 million households. I mean, that's an entire energy grid transformation.
It is.
So then they turned their attention to transportation, which is often the hardest source to tackle in these rapidly growing cities.
Yeah.
How did they handle that without, crippling the economy?
They focused heavily on decoupling private vehicle use from economic success.
What does that mean exactly?
So they massively invested in urban rail expansion and, at the same time, used disincentives like curbing parking provisions in busy areas. They used market controls like license plate lotteries and even driving bans for older, high-polluting vehicles.
And they pushed electric, right?
Oh, crucially.
Yeah.
They heavily incentivize the adoption of what they call new energy vehicles, or NEVs, making it way easier for those buyers to get license plates than for combustion engine cars.
And we can't forget the bigger picture, right? The external sources. I remember reading about those infamous sandstorms that used to hit Beijing every spring.
Exactly. They invested in these huge, large-scale afforestation projects, planting trees and stabilizing the soil on their northern borders. 15 years ago, these sandstorms were a common, recurring problem.
A huge source of natural particulate matter.
A huge source. And now, thanks to these projects, they're a rare sight. So the combined result of this systemic $100 billion intervention is staggering. Beijing's average PM 2.5 levels dropped, and researchers estimate a likely increase of 4.6 years in life expectancy for residents.
Nearly 5 years of life gained, simply through aggressive policy change. That's just incredible.
And nationally, China accounted for 3/4 of all global air pollution reductions between 2013 and 2020. They proved it can be done. But here is the troubling contrast we have to confront. During that exact same period, South Asia, and especially cities like Delhi, they experienced a worrying, sustained increase in particulate pollution.
So this shift in the global burden leads us right to Section 2. We saw a system work and save lives in Beijing. But when that political will stalls, the biological cost starts to add up.
Yeah.
Let's look at the price paid for that policy gap. Here's where it gets really interesting. We're moving past the AQI number to look at what this pollution does inside the body.
And the health data coming out of India is, well, it's genuinely alarming. The death rate due to ambient particulate matter pollution in India increased by a massive 115.3% between 1990 and 2019.
Wow.
In Delhi specifically, the pollution is complex. It's a toxic soup of vehicle and industrial emissions combined with those massive, predictable seasonal spikes every October-November from crop burning in the states around it.
So let's start at the point of contact, the lungs. What do the epidemiological studies show when they compare Delhi residents to control groups in cleaner rural areas?
Well, just looking at symptoms, 22.3% of Delhi residents reported lower respiratory symptoms. That's compared to just 12.7% of the rural control group.
So almost double.
Almost double. But the real deep dive, the biological toll, that's found at the cellular level, especially in the lungs' defense systems.
You're talking about the alveolar macrophages, those tiny cleanup crews in our lungs.
Yeah.
Are they the first thing researchers look for when they're assessing chronic exposure?
Precisely. They are the absolute frontline defense. So when researchers analyzed the sputum of Delhi residents, they found a massive biological response from these macrophages, or AMs.
Okay.
The count of these cells nearly doubled, 12.9 per high power field versus 6.9 in the controls. And listen to this. The cells themselves were significantly larger. They measured 27.8 micrometers compared to 16.2 in the control group.
That size difference,
Yeah.
it suggests they're just completely overloaded.
Absolutely. That size change means the cells were heavily loaded with captured particulate matter phagocytosed particles. This isn't just moderate exposure. It's an extreme, chronic upregulation of the lung's defense mechanism. It's fighting what is basically an overwhelming foreign invasion 7 days a week.
And that chronic damage, it must carry risks far beyond just a cough.
Right.
I mean, are we talking about exposure levels that are basically equivalent to smoking cigarettes daily, even for non-smokers?
The data really supports that severity. The study showed that 15.9% of non-smokers in Delhi had metaplasia.
Which is when healthy airway cells change type.
Right. A well-known precancerous risk factor. And on top of that, 3.0% showed dysplasia. Beyond the cell changes, researchers also found siderophages, which are iron-containing macrophages. The presence of these cells was 6.2-fold higher in Delhi residents than controls.
And what are siderophages signaling in the lung?
They signal tiny internal bleeding, pulmonary hemorrhage. It's happening because of the physical and chemical irritation from this particle overload. The body is just constantly trying to repair microtears and fight this internal inflammation caused by the pollution.
It's genuinely startling. We're talking about a major metropolitan area where the basic mechanics of the human defense system are failing this catastrophically.
Yeah.
But the pollution doesn't stop in the lungs.
No, it doesn't.
Those particles and the inflammation they cause, they make their way into the bloodstream. And that's where the damage becomes systemic and targets the engine of the body, the heart.
The cardiovascular and hematological findings are just as concerning. Overall, 36.1% of Delhi residents had hypertension.
36%.
Which is nearly 4 times the rate seen in the rural controls. It was only 9.5%. And this hypertension risk correlated positively, directly, with the level of what we call RSPM, respirable suspended particulate matter, in their environment.
And we focus on the blood itself, the engine of the circulatory system. What were the key changes they found there?
We saw definite signs that the body was prematurely putting its clotting system on high alert. The study showed hyperactivation of circulating platelets. Delhi residents had 2.8 times more P-selectin activated platelets than the controls. And platelet activation is crucial in forming blood clots.
So their baseline risk for a catastrophic clotting event, like a heart attack, is elevated by nearly 3 times just because of the air they breathe.
Exactly. It's like they're walking around with a built-in cardiovascular risk amplifier. And we saw other signs the body was fighting an emergency, like these abnormal hematological findings, a 3.5-fold rise in target cells and a 2.2-fold rise in toxic granulation in white blood cells.
Which you see in severe infection or poisoning.
Precisely.
So we've got lung injury, high blood pressure, and a clotting risk. But the engine for all of this systemic breakdown, that's often oxidative stress, which leads directly to DNA damage.
That's where the systemic breakdown becomes crystal clear. Particulate matter exposure causes oxidative stress. We sometimes describe it as, rusting the body from the inside out.
Right.
When researchers looked at the body's ability to defend itself against this, they found a catastrophic failure. Delhi residents showed a 30% depletion of the key antioxidant enzyme superoxide dismutase, or SOD, and an astonishing 76% reduction in total antioxidant status.
That's 76% reduction. That means your whole defense system and SOD, that crucial enzyme that stops your cells from rusting, is functionally failing to keep up.
Yes.
And the defense mechanism is failing, then we start seeing genotoxicity or DNA damage.
Absolutely. The data showed a 2.1-fold increase in micronuclei, or MN, count in buccal and airway cells. You can think of micronuclei as little fragments of the nucleus that result from chromosome breakage or DNA damage.
It's like the blueprint for the cell is being damaged.
It's being torn. The core instructions are being damaged by the sheer chemical load.
What's really fascinating here is the geographical tie-in.
It connects the dots perfectly. Researchers found the MN frequency was lowest in South Delhi, which has the city's lowest pollution, and it was highest in North Delhi, where the pollution levels are highest. The direct link between chronic exposure and genetic damage is just undeniable.
And to top all this off, there are these surprising findings related to neurobehavioral health, showing the brain is also deeply affected by this chemical stress.
Yeah, the mental health impacts are sobering. Depression prevalence was twice as high in Delhi residents, 69%, compared to 34.5% in the controls.
Wow.
And certain symptoms correlated directly with pollution exposure, especially benzene. Things like transient loss of memory and inability to concentrate, anxiety, even heart palpitations.
Is there biological evidence for this?
There is. Delhi residents showed elevated epinephrine and norepinephrine, your classic stress hormones, and a decline in plasma dopamine, which strongly suggests neurological changes linked to this chronic environmental stress and, poisoning.
This brings us right back to that contrast with Beijing and the policy gap. We've seen the success template, but we're seeing systemic challenges elsewhere.
And it has a huge economic cost. The total economic loss due to air pollution in India through premature deaths and morbidity was estimated at $36.8 billion in 2019.
$36 billion.
That's 1.36% of the country's entire GDP. And Delhi carries the burden of the highest per capita economic loss.
India's National Clean Air Program, the NCAIP, is meant to tackle this, but the sources point to some clear struggles in implementation. For example, the goal was to have 1,500 manual air quality monitoring stations running by 2024.
Right.
But by December 2023, only 931 were actually functioning. You just can't implement a Beijing-style targeted policy without that real-time comprehensive data.
And that's compounded by these fundamental planning failures. We talked about how targeted policy works in Beijing, right?
Yeah.
That targeting relies on source apportionment studies. They tell officials exactly where the pollution is coming from, so you can target interventions effectively. Yet, by the end of 2023, only 44 out of 131 of these non-attainment cities had even completed these essential studies.
So if you don't know where the pollution is coming from and you don't have enough monitors to track it, the policy is essentially blind.
Exactly. It forces cities like Delhi to rely on...
We can look to the Parapur Business Center, or PBC. This is an office facility that, crucially, maintained rigorously clean indoor air quality, low particulates, and critically undetectable levels of benzene and formaldehyde, even while operating in the heart of the polluted city.
This localized study compared the PBC employees to other Delhi office workers, and the results were just astounding. The PBC employees saw a 34% reduction in overall lung function deficits. The reduction was even more dramatic for what they call the combined type of deficits, a 48% reduction.
So think about that.
Good.
Spending your working hours, so a third of your day in clean air, was enough to reverse nearly half of the measurable combined lung damage.
And it wasn't just that. They saw significantly lower prevalence of basic symptoms like headaches and eye irritation. And on the deeper biological markers we discussed,
The DNA damage.
PBC employees showed a 36% lower micronucleus count, indicating significantly less DNA damage, and a 20% lower prevalence of hypertension than their counterparts. This small, localized example is so powerful. It demonstrates that continuous exposure to cleaner air, even if it's intermittent, leads to rapid and measurable health benefits. The body heals itself the moment you remove that toxic load.
So what does this all mean for you?
I think the sources confirm that chronic particulate pollution, PM10 and PM2.5, it isn't merely an environmental inconvenience. It's causing a systemic breakdown in the human body. It's contributing to gene damage, pulmonary hemorrhage, severe cardiovascular risks, and significant mental health decline.
Yeah.
The contrast between Delhi's struggle and Beijing's success shows that effective change demands systemic, proactive, massive investment. It has to move far beyond reactive, temporary bans.
And the fact that working just a few hours a day in clean indoor air like at the PVC can reverse over a third of lung function deficits and significantly reduce DNA damage gives us undeniable proof. It demonstrates the body starts healing rapidly the moment we clean up the air.
And that leads to a final provocative thought for you to consider. The epidemiological studies show that high levels of this respirable suspended particulate matter, RSPM, are positively correlated with hypertension. And hypertension is, in turn, negatively correlated with lung function.
So they're directly linked.
A deep, interlinked physiological connection. Lung damage leads to heart stress, which then further degrades the lungs. So what does that tell you about the urgency of tackling air quality, not just as an environmental problem, but as an immediate risk factor for multisystemic chronic disease?